Hello, Internet people. The fact that you're here today means you passed our selective test, which was designed to keep you out. It's been a while since we last discussed the 11 Plus, so today we thought it'd be a good idea to look at the current landscape. Mr. John?
Good question.
It's a great question there.
Let's start with, what was the original purpose of the 11 Plus exam?
The 11 Plus was always designed to select the brightest and best students. Essentially, I do think that hasn't really changed. That's not in a state of flux. It's just the different ways that they're selecting people, and I think the extent to which they select. So when it first started post-war, I think there was a initial idea that our economy is split into kids who will go into academia and become, engineers and things like that, like where you require university education, and let's say the more vocational labourer. So initially, in a time where very few people went to university, I think that was the initial concept, is that there was meant to be a sort of split in the workforce where people would go down the vocational route, some would go down the academic route. But that's changed somewhat in the sort of intervening years. More and more people going to university and that kind of thing. So it's exactly the same, but it's more competitive than ever.
Do you think it's still as useful as it used to be?
No. Not in that sense. They used to have grammar streams within secondary moderns. So
it's like where like a school passes the like primary school students onto a...
I'll give you an example. So my dad, he didn't pass... My uncle passed 11 plus, he went to a grammar school. My dad didn't pass, but he had missed quite a lot of school. But he went into a secondary modern, and then he went into a class, and that was a grammar school stream. He went in a class called G. So the idea with that was that you receive a grammar school education despite not having passed. I guess you can think of it as a bit like, say, Set 1 in a regular state school. Even if students don't pass 11 plus, there's still the opportunity to have a pretty good education. But now I think it's more competitive every year. I think there's more and more people going for it. So I guess that's changed somewhat, because I think all those years ago, not many people would even think that they would necessarily have to. Well, we had a low population as well, and that also sort of factors into it. So we've got a higher population now, so more competition. And I think with higher immigrant population, we've got a bit more drive towards the 11 plus, so there's a lot more people taking it. So it has changed, but the original idea hasn't changed much. It's still to select the brightest and best.
I think one of the thing that you said about sets, that's sort of one of the reasoning behind grammar schools in the first place, isn't it? It's easier to teach a cohort that are of the same sort of academic ability, but then the same can sort of be achieved in comprehensive and second modern schools, where you have this set system. You've got a top set, sort of your middle set or sets, and then your bottom set.
I suppose
I think I'm sort of in the middle as to whether
it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is a little bit of a difference in that if the whole school is selected, then obviously like the students at the very top in the top set will be a lot stronger on average, and same with the middle sets as well. They'll be stronger. So even if you're in set 3 or set 2 in a grammar school, that's potentially you're working at a higher level than a set 1 in a state school. But there's plenty of very intelligent state school students. So
you've also got less people going to university now as well, because originally it was to guide people through that grammar school and into universities. But you now have less people going to universities as well.
Compared to what? So
compared to when it first started. So it started in, like we said, after the war, 1944. Basically, it was a way of getting people from secondary school, like grammar school, technical school, or modern. The grammar school would basically prepare people to go to universities. But I'm saying, like, nowadays, there's less people going into universities.
Really? No, I would have thought more people would go to universities now, than back then, because only about 2% of people went to uni in Like more when my dad
I guess
went.
compared to then, but I mean, like, there's a decline currently.
Oh, do you mean over the past few years?
Yeah. So do you think that's making the 11 plus less important, like in recent history?
Well, I think the value of being a graduate has decreased with the increased cost in university fees. So the return on investment becomes less because there is something called the graduate premium. So like graduates tend to earn more than people who don't graduate from a university. But I'd say like over the past few years, because student fees have risen, there's less of an incentive for people to go down that route.
But you've also got more and more people doing apprenticeships and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And like scarcity creates value.
Yeah.
So there's so many people with degrees nowadays that they're obviously less valuable.
Obviously, there's a shortage of people in certain trades where there wasn't as much in the past, partially because of the population increase. So
there's a whole variety
but there's so many factors behind it.
Yeah. So should we go into what's going on currently? Because I think that's what most people will have clicked here for. The lot of changes, exam boards,
different
formats for each one, and I think quite a lot of parents, at least from like our experience, are a little bit lost as to what they should be doing and what they should be going for and what they need to know for each exam board.
Well, I'd say there's sort of one overall change, and that's the increase of the schools generally that are adopting an online approach to the exams. So they're utilising a test bank of some kind to select their students. Yeah, especially in the independent school sector.
So originally we had GL, which was 4 different papers.
Yeah.
Maths, English, verbal, non-verbal. It was one time for the entire paper, and there were 4 of them, right?
Well, they used to do it split across 2 test days. So there was like
there's a standard format, and then the borough can also request certain changes for the exam.
Yeah, so there can be changes in between different boroughs and stuff. Yeah. But originally, at least like 10 years ago or something, that was a structure, right? And then CEM came along in, don't remember the year, around 2013, that sort of time, and they introduced a style of paper that was 2 papers with all 4 subjects within that paper, and each section was timed individually. Like 10 minutes on data handling, 5 minutes comprehension.
But then I remembered when I did the 11 plus that it was timed individually, section by section.
Was it?
When I took the
I don't think it was.
tests. Yeah, I think it was.
I honestly don't remember.
I don't think it was. I think it was one.
I remember it was, but
I know that CM was introduced to make it to make the 11 plus a little more challenging.
Yeah, more tutor proof is what they call it.
Yeah, because they found
nothing's tutor proof.
More tutor proof.
Yeah.
But then they've actually found that the reverse happened. So
because the thing is, because they introduced so many different and new things. Like for example, there weren't 3D nets and 3D non-verbal questions before, so people felt like they had to get tutoring for it because it was a new thing.
Yeah,
and obviously that tipped the scales the other way.
I think was it councils and basically educationalists are obsessed with the idea of social mobility. So they always go, okay, well, we want to encourage, like, say, poorer students to be able to enter these grammar schools, and for it not to just be all the sort of richer kids being able to get in because they've got access to tutors. So that's the thinking behind making it more tutor-proof. So you've got the selection of people just with higher IQs who are able to get in. But in practice, it ended up going the other way because they studied it. So they analysed how students were doing in the switch to CEM, and they found that actually it was not encouraging social mobility at all. It was actually worse than before. Like you said, and that's probably because if you got access to people who can teach how to tackle those components, which someone from a lower socioeconomic background is unlikely to have, then they're going to have issues with it. So probably the fairest way of doing it is just to do maths and English, because everyone learns maths and English.
Yeah, but it doesn't test everything, does it? Like,
yeah, I know, but I'm just saying they're trying to push this social mobility goal. But if you have specific components that they don't tackle in school, then you're not going to encourage social mobility.
So for a long time, that's been the two exam boards. Well, actually, no, we had CSSE as well.
Yeah.
Which is more using the Essex side of things. They have creative writing, whereas the others don't. They're not multiple choice for the most part, whereas the other ones mostly are.
They have like a little, it's like some of the paper is a little bit multiple choice and some of it
it's like mixed,
mixed format.
Yeah, and then the online examples like ISEB.
So they're the newer version,
Yeah, they are multiple choice as well, and the SET.
But they didn't used to be, that's the thing. The reason why is just because of profit. So it's easier.
You don't have to employ people to look through written answers and all that sort of stuff.
So it's easier. It's a profit motivated change, like everything that we see.
In terms of what's happening now, what are the new exam boards?
So recently we've got Atom, which has started to enter, especially some independent schools. We've got Forest and Chigwell, other places using Atom.
So they're local to here.
Yeah. And they've got things like creative comprehension, which is it's just not straightforward comprehension. There's some like problem solving within it and that kind of thing. So that's something that I saw.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
So it's not just read this text and answer these questions. It's like,
so like inferring you've like those questions with like dates that you can figure out this person was.
It will use all kinds of things within it. So like it could have charts and stuff like that. So they've got to work out or infer some information from. It's a bit more involved, a bit more complicated. I guess that's quite good because it encourages this flexible thinking. It's harder to prepare for because you've just got to sort of cope with it. And that's kind of why if I ever teach children how to pass independent school exams or something like that, I always think the most important thing overall is just being an adaptable problem solver. So just teaching that ability to cope with curveballs, not teaching specifically for a test or anything like that. It's more, can they develop a wide range of skills that they can sort of utilize in this situation. Also, obviously, CEM, they moved online. So now we've got more boroughs taking up GL. And GL they were traditionally split across 2 test days. But we've had more boroughs, obviously, seemingly wanting to request to have one specific test day and utilising some of those CEM elements. So the timed individual sections, which don't allow you to go back and forth in the paper, which I guess adds a little bit of difficulty, but it could probably help some kids with their time management a bit, because if they insist that there's a certain section that I've had this experience sometimes when you give a kid 80 questions or something like that, they don't
do like 25.
Yeah, they don't know how to manage their time, so they just go, okay, I'm going to spend like 30 minutes on this like little section here, and it's like, that's not the best way of doing it. So I suppose,
especially if each one's 1 mark.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of good in that sense. Although it does add, for a lot of kids, it adds an extra layer of difficulty.
It's just something else to think about, isn't it? So you said ISEB, Atom.
Yeah.
The different boards.
Yeah. ISEB, Atom, GL, CEM,
CSSE.
And
CSSE.
The selective eligibility test.
The what?
The SET used in Sutton.
Yeah. And also there's the future stories.
Do we know the formats of these ones?
Yeah, so I think it's but there's a maths and English paper, which I believe is around 45 to 50 minutes each, and then it's used for a group of schools around the Sutton area, Wallington.
Yeah, consortium.
Yeah, Wallington, Tiffin, and there's a stage 1, and for some of the schools ask for a stage for a second stage of testing. But yeah, it's used for a consortium of schools.
Okay.
And Future
And then-
Stories is like a bit of a strange one. Again, it's like a consortia of schools, and I can't remember which schools. I know Chelmsford isn't in that, like Chelmsford Grammar School for girls. That is part of it. So I need to learn that because one of my students is actually doing that exam. But I believe there's creative writing in it. So it seems to be a weird combination of CEM and CSSE in a sense, because it's got that creative writing side. But I think the creative writing is actually quite difficult. They've got to write something quite long. But I don't know. We're just gonna see loads of random exam boards, sort of. And I think more and more schools will start to produce their own
Yeah, I
sort
was going
of.
to say that.
Yeah, as it becomes a bit easier to develop their own exams internally. I think we'll see more and more schools develop their own bespoke systems, or they'll, join forces and create one.
Yeah, so everything's a bit up in the air at the moment. It's like,
I think we'll see changes over the next, say, it does take time, obviously, and they've got contracts in place. So obviously, like any of these test banks, they'll have like a 5-year contract or something like that in place. But after that, you'll see more and more shifting. So every like 5 years or so.
makes it more difficult for us.
It does, but
Especially when we try and make mock papers and things to
no,
reflect.
that can be tricky because it can be difficult to reflect the exact nature of the paper.
Yeah, and by the time we've finalised
Yeah.
a few sets of papers, it's time to change everything again, isn't it?
That's why I think it's quite important to actually teach them as much as possible. Like just
Expose
Yeah.
them to a lot of different.
and so many
Yeah.
kids take more than one exam as well. So I have kids that take like say 3-4 sets of exams, and it's like completely different. So I just go, what do you aim for? You just cover as wide a base as possible,
Well,
so
I mean,
they're not.
In the last few years, we've had Redbridge and Essex schools. They used to be on different days, didn't they?
Yeah,
Last
but
few
they're
years,
on-
been on.
they've been on the same
I feel like it's purposely done just to make them make a
decision.
Yeah.
Well, I get quite a lot of kids that are doing the independent schools too. And then there's a whole difference there because you've got, say, Bancroft's doing CEM, but then you've got like Chigwell doing Atom.
But you've got
And
another
then
3 or 4 months to work on
Yeah.
that after.
Yeah, although some of them haven't. It's like some of the kids they hadn't done reasoning, so I have to like teach them a ridiculous amount of reasoning in 3 months, which is not ideal.
The last time we spoke about the 11 plus was probably about a year and a half ago. I mean, in a podcast, obviously, we've spoken about it
Every week.
every day. But that whole last podcast was episode 12. A whole conversation on whether we thought the 11 plus was right or wrong for specific people.
Mhm.
I don't know if our views have changed on that since the last conversation. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Who's it right for? Who's it wrong for?
I don't know. I think it's sometimes difficult to say. Like I see some children and I think, right, okay, that they are well suited to a grammar school, to the point where I think they may find life in certain comprehensive schools difficult.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think you can get a good education in most schools, because it's also highly dependent on the individual and the teachers within the school. Things like teacher retention rates make a difference. If you've got one consistent good teacher throughout your academic life, I feel like that plays quite a key role. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of difficult to say like who it's
not like
right and wrong for.
There's a lot of grey area. It's not like yes or no.
I feel so, yeah.
The people who fly through the 11 plus, and it's relatively straightforward for, so they get very high qualifying scores and just have, they're more capable with, academia, then grammar school's the right route for them generally. Because in a state school, even if they obviously they're in the top set and that kind of thing. There are some really, really good state schools though that can cater for them, but some state schools can't cater for that sort of level of ability. Then I think a grammar school is a good solution. But I'd say some people who just about get in, it might actually be a suboptimal situation for them, because to be at the bottom in a school is never a nice thing.
Yeah, it knocks your confidence. This is what we said last time, I think.
Yeah.
It's like if you the people that just get in, they do worse than the people that just missed out. Because the people that just missed out are usually at the top of their class in a non-selective school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that carries with them from like year 7 to GCSE. They actually do better in the GCSEs than the kids that just got in
Yeah.
to a selective school and are kind of at the bottom.
Yeah.
It does play a big part. And I don't think a lot of people or a lot of parents realise.
Yeah. And then all the sort of ability is already within the child. So
I can see that, but on the converse, you get so those who just miss out, they also carry that. I failed this.
yeah.
I failed this big exam, which for them at that age is very often an exam which is built up to be sort of a be all and
It's
end
kind of
all.
a brutal exam because
Yeah,
It's the only test in your entire life that you never get to take again.
yeah.
Will I retry for?
yes, yeah.
You can fail your driving test a number
Yeah.
of times. Like,
Even blood tests, you can go in twice, 3 times. And you never know why. You can never fix.
yeah, you can't
You don't know
fix
why.
it.
You can never retake it. It's kind of brutal for a 10, 11-year-old to go through that.
The biggest barrier to a child, aside from just academic ability and that kind of thing, is all the maturity to be able to handle it. So to be able to study hard enough to get in, but also to be able to handle a test situation, those sort of things make a big difference.
What makes it challenging for children at the age of 10, 11? So I think one of the challenges is if you're in an area where there aren't that many grammar schools or independent schools, like Redbridge, for example, where we only have 2 grammar schools, one for boys, one for girls. The competition is quite tough. It is very immense. So I think that's one of the challenges. But at the same time, just to maybe contradict myself, I don't think introducing more grammar schools is the solution. I think going back to what I said earlier, maybe looking at bringing quality teachers in
That stay.
is
Yeah.
better solution.
I think that having the grammar school stream within a ordinary school makes.
How would that work?
So, like it happened with my dad. So, even though he didn't get into grammar school, he was able to have sort of a grammar education because it was in the higher sets. There's loads of things in grammar schools that you sort of. So, for instance, Latin, you can study Latin, and
they're more. They have a slight bias towards the more sort of academic subjects, right? Maths, science,
yeah.
languages such as Latin.
You like in business studies, you wouldn't be able to, but you could study economics.
Yeah, I think the more vocational subjects are catered for slightly better at the comprehensive schools.
What about the age, maturity? Because obviously children born earlier in the year will have an advantage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's probably it's one of the biggest factors, definitely. Sort of how mature the child is. There is a massive difference between children born at the beginning compared to born at the end.
People mature at different rates, firstly, but also at that age, things change very quickly.
I also think there's a big difference between boys and girls.
There is, yeah.
There's quite a lot of evidence that suggests that boys are at least a year behind girls in terms of maturity.
More than that.
Yeah, it's probably more than that, because you reach your mental maturity as a man when you're like in your 20s.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
No, it's true. I watched something the other day. It's true.
No, I'm laughing at myself because I don't.
Because what?
I'm laughing at myself because I don't think it's true for me, but
it was definitely true for me.
I still act like a kid. So.
I think it's 26 or something like that. That's the.
Yeah. So this I can't remember what the podcast was, but I think it's about 2 or 3 years. So when a girl at 16 will have the mental age of a guy at 19 or something like that.
No, I mean,
And they have so they actually have an advantage in terms of education.
I notice it massively when I'm teaching them for 11 plus, like the massive difference between the boys and the girls. Like the girls actually,
No, I've noticed it too.
the boys are just like, oh, I just want to like play around or something like that, and then the girls are more, a lot more focused.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just bad in this specific situation.
Yeah,
because people like you do learn by messing about with things and like taking things apart, putting stuff together. Like you learn from your environment.
There's
a different type.
There's some people who believe that boys should start school later than girls.
I think they probably should.
Yeah, like they need to spend a bit more time just like playing around, and then because they need the maturity to actually cope with academic study. I think it's the most important factor, actually, maturity. Obviously, you've got academic competence and stuff like that, but in terms of actually getting the improvement over time, if you're working with a child, then maturity comes probably top of the list, because they need to be mature enough to take on these concepts and concentrate and that kind of thing,
plan and revise and all of that. Yeah.
And also just I think parental involvement's very important, but even some parents really want to, like, you can tell they're very keen, but their child is just not ready for that responsibility of taking it on, or doesn't really want to do it in the first place, and then it can be quite difficult to work with the child. Over the past few years, it's been more difficult to get the qualifying score to get into the school, and I think part of the reason is because of this pupil premium thing. So if a student's in receipt of a pupil premium, that will put them in front of children that aren't.
Even if they've got the same score?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, as in I think it's actually probably a good thing, but I'm just saying it makes it slightly more difficult to, yes, it will put them in front. Yeah. I think generally it's actually probably a good thing, but it does mean that it's harder to get a child in generally. If you think about the average person coming to a tuition session, they're going to be usually in a slightly higher economic.
So what if you have someone that does come to a tuition session but isn't like that well off? Say they're still doing pupil premium, and they do tuition. There's no way of like.
It might give them a slight advantage, but
but there's no way of controlling that, is there?
No, there isn't. But I suppose they can't control that. So it's not. But I suppose it's good that a child from a lower socioeconomic background can get in, or has a greater chance of getting in. I think that's probably a good thing overall, because it allows for that social mobility.
Didn't you say that was happening at university as well at the moment?
With universities providing reduced offers, these contextual offers based on sort of where you live or whether you were offered free school meals, things like that.
But I've noticed that also at independent school level too. So although I'd say there's fewer generous scholarships, there's more bursaries available. So that sort of gives you more of a chance of being able to get to a school despite being, say, like middle class. I think there's a general effort across the board to improve social mobility, but I think it's quite an impossible thing really, because you've got sort of postcode selection as well. So obviously people buy houses near schools, and then that will put up the prices of houses in places that are within the catchment area of a school or a good school. So everything's a postcode lottery.
The catchment area thing is kind of crazy, because we've known people that have literally been on the other side of the road. Like sometimes the catchment splits a road in half, and we've had people that live here on this side of the road, and the catchment is on that side, and they just don't get a place.
Yeah,
like they're really strict about it.
Well, I've known people who've got really high scores, but they don't get in because they're just not in the catchment. Obviously, somewhere like Ilford County, ridiculously oversubscribed, a lot of applicants. I think for the past like 7 years or something like that, no one's got in from outside the catchment because they've got limited places, and the ones within the catchment take priority. So there's a lot of things like that.
It's about a 1 in, I don't know if it's changed now, but it's about a 1 in 13 or 13.5.
Yeah, very, very low. I think it was like 1 in 12 a few years ago.
It's now
slowly going.
Yeah, it's now 1 in 13 to 14.
Yeah.
For someone that's going into the 11 plus preparation process now, how would you advise them?
Are they in year 5? Or are they in year 4?
Start with year 4. I mean, our course starts in year 4. I know a lot of people jump into year 5, but obviously 2 years is better than 1. So start with 4 and then we can go into 5.
At year 4, I suppose in those years 4 and 5, they learn a lot of new concepts. So especially things like fractions, percentages and decimals, they tend to be big challenges.
Mm-hmm.
As they enter year 4, as Saurav said, it's important for children to know their times tables. That also tends to improve their division and that kind of thing, because those are like 2 things that they tend to struggle with. So multiplying, especially two digit by 2 digit numbers, and also dividing. Then I think fractions, decimals and percentages tend to be big hurdles for them in year 4. So making sure that they're relatively strong with their understanding of those concepts, especially fractions, before they reach year 5.
Yeah, because you can't do ratio, proportion, that sort of stuff.
But I'd say like just having an early exposure to those concepts, and it's true that they don't necessarily completely understand them by the end of year 4, but if but they're exposed to them, that gives a better chance for them to understand them in year 5. In terms of reading, they need to be reading progressively and also enough, so a sufficient amount.
Yeah, because vocabulary is quite a big part of the 11 plus, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say even though obviously with the switch to GL, there's less of a focus on vocabulary compared to CEM, but it factors into a lot of things. So comprehension, having a strong vocabulary is very useful. And also just it improves their understanding of, say, a story and their ability to infer if they're reading relatively complex books.
Yeah. I mean, it also helps them answer worded maths questions.
Yeah. So
verbal reasoning, obviously.
Comprehension's really, really one of the most important skills that you'll ever learn too. So there's no harm in doing it, even if they don't pass.
Yeah. So we get all the foundational knowledge in year 4. For those that are starting in year 5,
well, all of that and more, basically. So the hard thing I think to get right is momentum, because what I've noticed is there's some kids they start to lose momentum at the end of year 5, but that's the time when you need to actually have momentum. So through the summer holiday, actually that's critical time. Whereas some students, they might take a holiday or something like that, or they might do something, or they might work less, and that's where I find a lot of people pass and fail. Is in those critical month before they start school, because if they don't have that momentum going into it.
Yeah, I mean it could go the other way as well. I've seen a lot of times where children get overworked and they've got the momentum, they're going up, and then they get to like Easter or July, and the momentum, they burn out and then they drop off. Then they've got to get from there back up again in like a month.
Yeah, so I think the timing of the breaks is important too, when they're taken, because it'll be different for different people as well.
Yeah.
For me, just anecdotally from what I see, every single year there's a few students and I start to notice, I don't know, they either are lacking a bit of momentum or they need more work. Often it'll be more work, to be honest. In the vast majority of cases, it's that they need to be working harder.
But you want the build-up to be towards the exam. You don't want to be working harder and then drop off.
It's hard to say, and also like there's things that characterize that momentum that aren't just about work. It's like the child's incentive to
everything.
Yeah, there's a lot into the child's mood as well. Like there's so many critical things.
There's
like
food, sleep, exercise, what's going on at home, what's going on at school.
Yeah, stimulation generally, that kind of thing. There's a lot of factors as they go into an exam, but I'd say like this is why I always advise against taking a holiday in that year 5 year. I'd say in year 4, take your holiday, take a nice long holiday, something like that. Just because in year 5 you're not gonna you need that momentum going into the exam. So I always recommend, especially if anyone joins in year 4, I'm always like, take a holiday in summer, because in year 5 you shouldn't be taking that long holiday. Fine for a week or something like that, but
I've noticed it happening more and more recently. People going away at that time in year 5.
Yeah, wasn't too bad this time. People were taking relatively short holidays, but it's taken that like 4 or 5 week holiday where you'll completely lose momentum. The child will come back and
blank.
Blank. And like,
so what about things? Because I always think we spoke about this the other day. Things like consistency. How important do we think that is?
Yeah, no. So consistency is important, but also just remember, you want, especially a child in year 4 or year 5, you want them to have that joy for learning.
Yeah.
So consistency shouldn't be to the point where they sort of become robotic. That joy should still be there for learning.
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance there of making sure that consistency is also maintaining that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining that joy.
I think that's one of the most complex things in terms of what we do. Like finding the balance, because there is that, like, sometimes I think, oh, there's so much to get through today, we need to crack on, but then sometimes I'm like, look, they're looking a bit it's like they need
something fun
a
to
game
do,
or something like that. Like they need something to sort of keep their sort of morale up, so they can sort of approach the learning with a bit more gusto, and that can be difficult to get right. So vocabulary games and things like that, I try to do a lot of that, like vocabulary centered work.
Yeah, we've got the whiz cards, we do Wordle.
Yeah, there's like
countdown numbers.
Yeah, and just
that sort of stuff.
I think also that's something that families can do too. So things like Junior Articulate, just as a sort of good general skill, that ability to articulate themselves, they can take that into secondary school and beyond, practicing that kind of thing. And also the speed of thought that's required to play some of those board games. So there's things that families can do to sort of encourage speed, first of all, because I do think it sort of boils down a lot to speed of thought, but also keeping it fun.
Yeah.
So keeping some aspect of learning or getting fascinated about words and that kind of thing. Make it a fun aspect too.
There's one more like sort of key challenge I want to bring up is, when do you think they should start full papers? I have my thoughts on this.
Full papers?
Yeah, full, like exam, 11 plus papers. Is there a time that's too early? Is there?
I think they should be doing some exam style questions throughout their learning. But an actual full length, actual full length paper towards the end of year 5, I think, because for example, if you're doing an exam that's in, it also depends when the.
So say the exam's in September.
Yes, right. So if the exam's in September, I'd say starting some papers, 3 months before, leaves you in a good position. I feel if you've done enough sort of preparation work and you've done sort of a handful of exam questions up until that point, then doing papers 3 months out of the exam, I think is ideal. I think.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think In terms of getting used to time conditions, it can be useful to start slightly earlier. But they don't necessarily need to do the exact exam format. So it's important for them to... Depends what you're thinking of what's the test for. So I think sometimes a test can be to evaluate their levels or assess that. In which case, like, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to test throughout the period.
But but you're talking about like not like catch up, sort of what you've done so far.
Yeah,
I'm saying full 11 plus exam papers.
In terms of, I think in terms of full
like final
exam
papers,
because you don't want to do them constantly, do you? Like, I think that would just jade them.
Yeah,
that can be a bit of an issue if they start really early and they're just relentlessly doing papers, then it's not the most helpful activity. So I partially agree with Siv in terms of that's probably that 3-month period before the exam is the time when you need to be doing a lot more. So like more regular papers. But then you could do one in March. It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, see, I was probably going to say Easter, April, May time.
Yeah,
because they won't have learned all the topics.
Yeah,
by
like you can sort of get a baseline, and just see how they are. Like
you do
it's
like easier papers
in
May, and then up to like 3 months before June, July, whatever.
Yeah,
start doing full.
Yeah, and the advantage with doing that is because some of the students won't have learned everything by that stage. Doing an exam in April, it also gets you can sort of see how their problem solving skills are being developed.
Yeah,
whether they're able to make a start on questions on a topic that they haven't learned before.
It's also good for them to see what they're aiming towards, because if they've never seen a full paper, they don't know what they're working towards.
Yes,
they do a full paper that sort of time, they can say, all right, I can see that I'm here, I need to get to here. Like having a target is useful.
I think it does depend partially on the child, because I've had some kids, they're so far behind that they need more learning time rather than spending all the time doing tests. Wouldn't be beneficial in those 3 months. They actually need to spend time like learning the material.
Well, if you don't know the concept, you can't answer it.
So in that case, but if a child is, like as Sarah said, more or less ready for the exam by say May or something like that, then in those 3 months, then the best use of the time is to
exam technique,
is to work on that exam technique. So how do you think the 11 plus will change in the future, or how would you like it to be in the future?
I like the paper-based system, but I think we will.
I don't see that sticking around.
Yeah, I think we will be moving to an online system, similar to the ISEB, where you've got some sort of adaptive AI-driven testing platform in place for most exam boards and schools.
So it like throws up so if you get it right, it throws up a harder question.
Yeah.
And if you get it incorrect, it drops you down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We did actually start making our own version of that, didn't we, a few years ago, where it gives you leveled.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I think it will be
computer adaptive.
Some sort of AI will be involved, for sure. And then back to what you said, probably if there isn't 1 or 2 exam boards that have cornered that AI computer market, then schools will create their own.
Yeah.
And then we'll have loads of different specified things for different schools.
Yeah. I think
you can kind of see that happening already.
I think because it'll be easier and easier to implement these AI
tools,
question banks and stuff like that. I think it will expand out. There's potentially a massive profitable market.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes in the last few years, and by the sounds of it, there's going to be a lot more.
Well done for making it this far. You've passed. Hopefully we've answered all your questions. If you've got any questions, let us know. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe or follow.
The Education Lounge Podcast.